Hello and welcome to Bitcoin with Jake. I'm speaking with Larry Lepard. How are you, Larry?
I'm great, thanks, Jake. Nice to be on your show for the first time.
No, well, thank you so much for joining me. Shout out to my friend Owen, Mr. Beefback Better. I managed to get your question in early, which was, how do I say your name properly? I was going for Lawrence
Uh,
Leopard. So Larry
Either way,
Lepard. Yeah.
yeah,
Larry, thank you so
whatever.
much for joining. So this is a show all about Bitcoin, but we weren't
Yeah.
always Bitcoiners. We didn't always talk about Bitcoin all the time. I recently heard you on a podcast saying you go to dinner parties and talk about gold and Bitcoin, and your wife says, please try
Yeah,
and
please
tone it
don't talk
down.
about
So
that stuff. Yeah.
we've all been there. Um, yeah, I'd love to understand from the listeners out there that might not know you, if you could introduce some of the projects that you're working on, most of your time at the moment, and then what we'll do is cycle back and work out how you got to this point today.
Oh, I
So,
got there. Yeah. Well, so my principal business and job, other than shit posting on Twitter and being a loudmouth on a bunch of podcasts, is I run my partner and I, David Foley, we run a fund called Equity Management Associates, and we call it a sound money fund, and that's really the theme. That's been the theme of my life, more or less for quite some time. And I'm not young. I'm 65. So, and I really strongly believe in sound money. We can go into how I got there, but so the fund we now raise, or now run, I should say, focuses on two areas of the sound money space. Old style sound money. I mean, you have to remember before 2008, Bitcoin didn't exist, and yet we existed, and I've been doing this for a while. And so we were investors in gold and silver mining stocks. We still are, and that's probably 80% of the fund today at market rates. Of course, what happened is Bitcoin came along, and I got kind of introduced to it, I think about 2013. I was aware of it before then. I was trying to buy it through um, Mt. Gox. Unfortunately, I didn't get my application finished in time, and they failed. So it's a good thing. If I had, I would have lost money, like Caitlin and some others. And but I bought my first Bitcoin in 2013, and kind of started down the rabbit hole, and was pretty concerned about the notion of digital money, and our computers stable enough to handle money. And I've been around computers since the 80s, and we've all had our IBM PCs go blue screen on us. And so I thought, how can you have something like money on a computer? But of course, over time, I learned you could, and I got more and more orange pilled. And of course, now I'm full-fledged raging, Bitcoin advocate. However, it has its pluses and minuses. One of the minuses we're now all experiencing, which is it's very volatile. And I've got a bunch of investors in my fund, many of whom are boomers or in the tail end of their careers or lives, and they don't like things that go down 70%. And so even though there's enormous optionality and a lot of upside, and I believe in it, I think it's the faster horse. I think it'll ultimately replace gold. I balanced the fund to be, steady sound money, what I call analog sound money in gold, and digital sound money in Bitcoin. And I'm really nothing but Bitcoin. I'm very much a maximalist. I'm very dismayed and pissed off that the crypto space has had so many frauds and so many bad things done, and because it scares. There's a lot of signal in Bitcoin. There's a lot of noise in all these other coins, and that noise has cost people a ton of money. I was looking today. I saw at its peak, Terra Luna had a $18 billion market cap, and that's just tragic. All the people who were in there that lost their money, and so I'm very strongly a maximalist when I look at Bitcoin.
it's very difficult to decipher what is noise and what is signal. I mean, we're all sitting at
It is.
home trying to work out, how do we keep our money? And it takes some time, it takes some work. I mean, in some ways, I'm a
It
bit
does it. Yeah.
aggressive about it. It's like the market teaches you. So if
Well,
you lost all your money in Luna, why did that happen? And what else can you do to solve the problem again? And maybe that steers you to Bitcoin.
well, there's that, and the other thing I think a lot of people have learned in this cycle, and they've learned it in every cycle, and I've known it for some time now. You look at an asset, and you see what it's done in the past. I mean, it's tragic. I saw a guy on Twitter, I don't know, a year ago, and he was following the Plan B model. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not going to comment on that, but Plan B had him convinced it was going to 150 overnight. So he took his one Bitcoin and he levered it up 5-1, and
mm,
it went through a pretty good sized correction, and bam, he got blown out,
yeah,
and now he had 0 Bitcoin. And
yeah,
so it's you need to understand what you're doing. We're in the very early days of an asset that's going to, in my opinion, take over the world. But those things, that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, the change of a reserve currency can take years, if not decades. And so
mm,
and we're in the early stage, very volatile. use the analogy, we're trying to put the ocean into a swimming pool, and it's a swimming pool that we're building, and we got to make it a bigger swimming pool to hold the ocean. And so you get these incredible price swings that, they're just dizzying to, to the average investor looking at this thing. So, it's tricky. You gotta be careful.
It's fascinating to watch, and it's 100% what brings us to the table to talk about. It's so fun.
Yeah,
It's just quite an extraordinary phenomenon that we're witnessing in real time.
exactly.
So
It's
Larry,
history.
what I'd love to do is wind a bit further back. I mean, we've only got an hour, so we can't do the whole Larry Lepard story. But
Yeah,
at some point you became an investor. You obviously grew up in the States. Like, teach me a bit about what that process was like. And
yeah. Probably a
at
lot of
some
people have
point
heard
you
this.
obviously, you said you're a
Yeah,
sound money fund before Bitcoin even came along. Why was
yeah,
that? And what
yeah.
had you
Okay.
done in your lifetime that made you realize that that was something you were so interested in?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick Reader's Digest view. So I grew up in the Midwest in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and my family was a small business family. My father had retail things, the biggest of which was a retail furniture store, and my grandfather had found, actually my great grandfather had founded that. So we were a shopkeeper family, and I was saying on another podcast today. I mean, my great grandfather was very badly hurt because in the 1920s, there were, it was the Roaring '20s, and he had a furniture store that was basically his house. He'd converted it into a store, and he was selling furniture to everyone who was moving to Ann Arbor to attend the University of Michigan. That was a pretty good business, and the market signals were telling him, "Hey, you got a lot of demand here, and you can't meet it. Expand." So he went to the bank and he borrowed a bunch of money, knocked down the house, built a bigger building, and now he had a bigger retail furniture store, but he also had debt. He did that in 1928.
Ooh,
You can guess
wow.
what happened next, right? The stock market crashed, the Roaring '20s were over, that Fed-induced bubble burst, and he spent the next 15 years, begging the banker not to foreclose on his business, and he made it. But it was a very humbling and trying experience for him, and and he figured out that it was the Fed that did it to him. He figured out that the bubble was based on what the Fed did to create, the growth of the stock market in the '20s, and he was always a sound money guy. So I guess my roots in the whole thing were way back then. But then I went off to college and I studied economics, and then I went to Wall Street and I worked there for a couple of years. I could see how kind of corrupt that was. Then I went to business school and I studied more investing. And I guess my highest and best use, or what I think the talent I was given. I wish I was given the talent to play guitar. I want to. I wish I wish I was Mick Jagger, or I wish I was a jet pilot. But since I didn't get those two talents, I was given the talent to analyze stuff and figure shit out. And so at business school, I kind of realized that probably the best career for somebody who likes to figure shit out is to be an investor. Figure shit out and make bets based on uncertainty, take risks based on uncertainty. So I got into the investment business, and my father was very smart. He gave me a book when I was in the '70s. He gave me a book called The Micro Millennium, which talked about how the microprocessor is changing the world, and that computers and technology were really going to be the future of development in business. And I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to come back to Michigan and sell furniture with you and run these retail operations." He said, "No, you're not. You're too smart to do this shit." He said, "If I were you, I'd get involved in the computer business." And so in '83, I joined a venture capital firm and I started investing in high tech and computer companies. And so from '83 until 2004, I was a high tech investor with three different venture capital outfits, the last of which I was one of the two senior partners. And we did pretty well. The last one did a lot of internet stuff. We did very well there. And it was really a lot of fun. I mean, it was great putting capital in small technology businesses that could grow to become big technology businesses. And I started with floppy disk drives, investing in that stuff in '83. And by the end, we were doing the internet. And throughout all that, as you know, there were a zillion cycles of graphics and local area networking, and I mean, you name it, memory chips, and et cetera, et cetera. So that was that was kind of my background. Throughout it all, I've been watching the Federal Reserve, watching the sound money stuff, following Ron Paul, reading all the Austrian economic texts, which I wasn't taught in college. And I realized, this whole system is broken. Keynes was wrong. The Great Depression was driven by, the Federal Reserve, and Keynesian thought has broken the money, and it was only getting kind of progressively worse. I mean, 1971 going off the gold standard was a big crime. You could tell that. My grandfather knew that, taught me about it. And over time, I came to see this in the background, this whole issue of sound money and how important it was. And I strongly believe that if you look at the society today, look at all the problems we're facing, that at the core, if you want to drain the swamp, the place to start draining is you get rid of the bad money. So my Twitter handle, as everyone knows, is fix the money, fix the world. It's not original to me. I saw it on Twitter and I swiped it. A lot of other people use it too. But the point is that, the money, it's very clear and getting clearer by the day that the money is completely broken. These price signals are just, how can anybody plan? You have, price of housing up 20% in a year, the price of oil goes up 200%, the price of gasoline goes up 200%. We've got a completely broken monetary system that's making it very hard for people to make business decisions and life decisions and to live, and to buy houses. And look, if you're a millennial today, how difficult it's going to be on a millennial salary to try and buy a house that's completely overinflated. Now, the good news is that's going to get solved here because we're going to have a housing collapse. But it's a very, very broken system that we live in. And at the core of that broken system is the bad money. And so, in the 80s, I started buying silver and gold, started investing in silver and gold companies, but it was never the front and center. I was still doing technology, really. And then when we got around to about, really it was 2008. In 2008, I became radicalized for sound money. I don't know where you were in 2008 or what you were watching.
I was just finishing school.
Yeah, boy, when they printed, when they walked in and dropped rates to zero and printed just enormous amounts of money, tripled the Fed balance sheet in a very short period of time, said they were going to hold rates low forever, bailed out all the banks, et cetera. I was like, oh my God, this is just nuts. I know what this means. We're going to Weimar. And it was quite a humbling experience for me because the bull market and gold had been going for some time. I jumped into it. It worked very well for about 3 years. And then they were able to get it under control and engineer a correction from 2012-ish, 2011, 2012-ish into the 2015 area. And that really kicked me in the face. It was a very, very hard time for me because I fundamentally knew that the thesis was right. But, and I knew this, but I just didn't prepare for it in that case. Markets breathe. They go hard in one direction and then they turn and they go, they correct. And so, gold went from, in the beginning of 2000, gold was $260 an ounce. It went to $1,900 an ounce in 2011. That's quite a bull market, right? I jumped into it halfway through, caught part of that move, more than halfway through, but caught part of that move. Then from 2011 to 2015, it went from 1900 back down to 1050. Well, as you might imagine, that put a big dent in my pocketbook. The bright side, the silver lining there is I was lazy and out of shape and let myself go physically. And I realized I had to be around for the long term to win this game. And so I kind of got crazy about fitness and I joined Crossfit gym and managed to, I think, extend my life by getting in super good shape. And I continue to do that to this day. So, and now, really what I view, my mission or my, what drives me in the morning to get up and go to work and do things, because in theory I could retire, is I want my kids and my grandkids to live in a world that's filled with sound money. And I want to be a representative. I think a generation of boomers many of whom were just concerned with themselves and were relatively greedy. And I was probably a part of that as well. In my younger years, I realized how broken and wrong this boomer system is. And we got to fix it. Right. And so I'm kind of committed to fixing it. And what's really fun for me is that, I've been a gold guy forever. And, in 25 or 27 or 28, 2005, 7, 8, I was wandering around talking Austrian economics, gold, this, that, and the other. Everybody thought I was on another planet. Nobody had any idea about fiat money or the cotillion effect or who von Mises was or any of the stuff that Safe taught all these people. And then, the Bitcoin standard comes out and a whole generation of millennials read it and they see Bitcoin and they buy it and they get it. And now I got 30-year-olds, talking to me about this stuff, telling me stuff that I don't know. And it's great. It's like the reinforcements showed up. You know what I mean? Yep. And you guys got a much longer runway to fight the battle. So
no, we're here, Larry. Bring it on. It makes sense.
Exactly.
Yes, I was graduating from school. I would have been 18. So 2009, I was 19 years old. And we're all looking for employment. We're thinking about going to university or whatever. And the employment market's been shot to smithereens. You've got 500,000 students moving to London to try and find work, and there's no work. And
Right.
it was a complete shit show, to be honest.
Exactly. Well, and as
I
I
I ended
talked to a
up
lot
going
of
to
millennials,
university, but yeah, it
yeah,
was, you know, it was still it's a very
I talked
challenging
to a lot of
time.
millennials, and they tell me stories of how badly 2008 hit their parents. You know what I mean? I
Yep.
mean, their parents lost their house, or their parents
Mm.
lost their job, or
Yep.
there was a lot of pain. I
Yep.
mean, people forget about it, but there was a ton of pain. I mean, not for the bankers; they all got bailed out,
Yeah.
but for the average person, I mean, to me, they did. I mean, that was similar to what happened to my grandfather. When you
Mm.
have a bubble burst, it ripples
Full
through
rug pull.
society. There is serious societal pain.
Well,
You
I
know,
mean, Larry, I could share with you actually very personal story. So my father, he actually died on January the 1st, 2009. So
I'm
our
sorry to hear
family
that.
business, we been going for almost 250 years. We make beer. So I'm originally from the
Oh, nice.
UK, and
Yeah.
I'm now based in Australia, where my wife's from. But yeah, we've been making beer for a long time, and we run a pub
Neat.
business across the south of the UK. And
Yeah.
it's connected for sure. But Dad was the CEO of the company. The pubs were taking 50% less revenue than they normally did. Disposable incomes were squeezed to smithereens, and he was
Yeah.
stressed. And he had a heart attack, and he died.
Yeah.
And you think,
Right.
whoa! I mean, there's no doubt that his lifestyle choices. He was 48 at the time, so a very young man
Oh boy,
in the
that's
grand
sad.
scheme of things. So he would be roughly the same age as you now, basically.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's an extraordinary time. Like, definitely it was connected. His business was not performing as expected, and there were people relying on him to make that performance improve. And one day his body was like, can't handle this, we're done. And he wasn't like a
Right.
crazily unhealthy person, but
Yeah.
undoubtedly it's connected. And now I think about it, it is all about the money, right? It's because the
Right.
system is completely and utterly rigged in the favor of a small percentage. We're all left running around trying to play this rat race game that it's already
Exactly.
rigged, right? It's already fucking
Totally.
rigged.
It's terribly
Whoa,
rigged.
it's
It,
powerful,
it,
isn't it?
it's
Whoa.
very powerful. It's completely rigged, and I mean, they want us to be afraid and fighting with each other and unable to retire, and we have to be slaves because we don't know how much. I mean, one of the saddest things about the monetary system, the way it's now established, is you can't realistically retire because whatever pile of money you've saved up that you would hope would give you comfort in your retirement is likely to be inflated away. I mean,
Mm,
my father died relatively young of cancer. He was 73, which I consider young. And, when he retired, he had a nice number. And by the time he passed, it had really been whittled away because of, the devaluation of the dollar and the
mm,
purchasing power of the dollar. And so they're really stealing people's time and lives. I mean, I'd say you're in the beer business, it's like watering the beer. I mean,
yep.
you don't, it's just every day, every year, everywhere, governments water the beer, and until we stop it, they're going to be able to steal from us and set up a system that benefits them and hurts us. And so, we've got them outnumbered, and I said it on Breed Love Show, I've said it on other shows. All we've got to do is spread the word and opt out, and save
Mm,
in currencies that they don't control. And gold and Bitcoin are the two non-state currencies. And the state currencies are bad, bad, bad.
mm.
And I mean, you can go down this rabbit hole. I'm sure you have. I mean, no ability to print money, no seigniorage. How are they going to pay for wars? We're not going to pay the taxes to let them fight wars.
No, they can't. It's what's so
Right?
fascinating about the whole thing. What I'd love to, well, first of all, highlight someone like yourself, 65. You've seen everything you can in your life so far from an investment perspective, investing at an early stage, investing in sound money. To be a
Yeah,
Bitcoin advocate, to me, is a big deal, because you've got 30, 40 years of experience saying this is a
right.
great idea. And so I can then
Yeah,
share this conversation with friends, family, whoever wants to listen, and say,
sure.
guys, someone who's got 40 years of experience in investing is into this stuff. Like, you need to
Oh
pay
yeah,
attention. And I love that.
yeah.
So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for standing up and talking about this stuff. It's crucial. And the question I then want to ask Larry is, and I have an affinity with this in a sense as well. So in my career, the last 10 years, I worked in the shipping industry. So I was very close to the commodities and fossil fuels trade.
Sure.
And I then moved into startups. I did 5 years working in startups, trying to start my own businesses. And technology is such an exciting place to invest. I did some angel investing in some clean tech companies and looking at like,
Yeah.
how does the world look in the future? How can we leverage technology today to get there? What regulations are coming in that you can, you know, make some money around? Money is a technology, and no one's
Yes.
ever told me that. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I've never had
Yeah.
that
No, that's
debate.
right.
No one ever said to me through my business school days, you know, here's how to make money, not how or what is money. To Robert Breedlove's point, what is money? Like, it's a
Yeah.
fascinating subject. So, talk to
It's
me a
like
bit about
Finch's.
that evolution of going. So you're a technology investor, you're looking for breakout technologies, and suddenly you come across this conversation that's money, which is a technology, and you
Right.
go, well, hang
Yeah.
on,
I
this
mean,
is the most important tech of the whole lot, isn't it?
yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, that's exactly right. And, I perhaps, I'm kind of uniquely positioned, I think, to understand this thing because I was a venture capitalist and I spent my life trying to identify new technologies and new things, new ideas and say, well, is this going to work? I mean, funny, you should mention, but I mean, back in 92 or 3, there were people who thought the internet was not going to work and there was no future in the internet. I mean, it was blindingly obvious to me.
Mm,
And yet, it is what it is. I mean, it was tough. I mean, you had dial-up modems and all that stuff. So to me, this is just blindingly obvious that this is going to work. I mean, it's a trend in motion. The dogs are eating the food. That was the test we always used to use in the venture capital business. Is user adoption increasing? And the reason why Bitcoin's going to win is because user adoption is increasing. We've got a
yeah.
fixed supply and we've got adoption increasing. I mean, there are only two things that would scare me about Bitcoin. Some smart people have asked me, so what are your concerns about Bitcoin? I'll tell you. My first concern about Bitcoin was the technology is going to blow up. Sat next to an MIT developer, a core developer, in 2015, and he said he goes to bed at night sometimes wondering, did I just croak the network,
Mm,
right? And the block wars scared me, and I mean,
mm,
it was risky in the beginning. The technology was not stable, or as stable as I think it is now. But we've had enough data, enough blocks, 750,000 blocks, whatever, been put together now, that I'm beginning, I'm pretty convinced that the technology is going to blow up. The other thing that would be really bad for Bitcoin would be if adoption stopped. If people just said, nah, you know what, this doesn't really provide me with any benefits, I'm not going to use it. But there's no chance of that happening because it does provide you with benefits. And consistently, year after year, day after day, month after month, we've seen growth in adoption, user addresses. I mean, any metric you want to use, hash rate,
mm,
whatever. So the fact of the matter is, you combine those two with a fixed supply and you just, numbers going to go up. I mean, that's just a fact.
mm,
Um, yeah, and it is a technical innovation, and that's what's hard. I think it's hard for people to map, a technical innovation onto something as different as money, because money generally hasn't been technically oriented. I mean, we had gold and silver, which were physical hard money, and then, we got ledger entries in banking, and of course now we have, Venmo and PayPal and a lot of other, they're all kind of, in a sense, they're all payment mechanisms. But at their base, what's the money? Well, the money is what the government controls. And, the government got a hold of this. I mean, before governments were big and powerful and kings and sovereigns were big and powerful, even they, well, I suppose in some cases they did say you've got to use this coin. But in general, I think internationally, people wanted to see a recognized store of value, and silver and gold emerged as the two that were the most natural. So it's tough. It's tough. I mean, it's tough for people. I try and orange pill a lot of gold bugs, and it's interesting. This will be a fact your audience will appreciate. I went to a gold show last year and I gave a speech, and this is old people. I mean, gold people in general are on the older side, right? If
mm,
you're really a gold bug, odds are good you're over 40, and a lot of them are 60, 70, 80, 90. An audience full of those people are probably 500 people. And I asked somebody asked the question from the podium, said, how many people here own Bitcoin? Because everyone there, how many people own gold? Every hand goes up. How many people here own Bitcoin? Half the hands went up.
wow.
That was pretty good. I mean, the gold people, they understand the issue. They understand the signorage, the privilege, the quintillion effect, the monetary
Mm,
madness that these banks have put us through. They just think gold's the right solution. And a lot of them come at me and argue with me and say, well, yeah, but you can't touch it. You can't feel it. You can't,
mm,
it's not a thing. It's not a commodity. It's got to be something. It's got to have an alternative use. And I'm like, no, it really doesn't. It's a ledger. And let's go way back in time before we were talking about gold as being money, when mankind hadn't even discovered gold. And guys were sitting in caves because they've got the records in France. The guys were sitting in caves and they were marking things. They were keeping tally scores on the wall. And what that probably was is, look, I killed a couple of bison and we ate those. And, so you owe me a few. It's your turn to kill. Here's how many I killed and here's how many you killed. You're a little short. And that was money. That was a ledger. Money is just social obligations. You can use money to get people to do things for you. And so if you're willing to, if you have a ledger that says, I've got this amount, you've got that amount, you owe me this, or I owe you that, that's as good as money. And that's really all your bank is. I mean, there's not physical money sitting in your bank. There's just a computer screen that says, I've got 1,000 pounds in my account. So the bank is really a ledger. The difference here is that what Bitcoin came along and did is it solved the problem or the issue of digital scarcity. In the past, everything that was digital by definition couldn't be scarce. You could copy it in a second and put it on a new disk drive. And so, with proof of work and the network and the difficulty factor and all the things that went into building the Bitcoin network, and truly genius. I mean, the way they put it all together. Well, all of that solved a problem that actually a lot of people have been working on for some time. If you go look at Adam Back and you look at some of the other guys, Lop and et cetera, who were doing the work beforehand, they've been working on that problem and nobody had solved it. And Satoshi, or whoever the group, I think it was a group of Satoshis, collectively solved it with Bitcoin. And now we have legitimate, immutable digital scarcity. And that's a big deal. I mean, that's, like think printing press, or think, electric light bulb, or think locomotive or internal combustion engine, or, whatever you want to do. I mean, it's an invention. It's actually a really big invention, a change, something we could not do, something we now can do. I mean, before the wheel, you dragged something behind you that had things on it. Somebody said, hey, if we put this on a wheel, this is going to move easier, right? I mean, it's before the printing press, the monks copied the manuscripts one at a time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Gutenberg said, no, we can set up a typeface, we can do this, and bingo, we can make thousands of copies of this. Anybody can read the Bible. I mean, this is a big deal. We did not have digital scarcity. We now have digital scarcity. And we put it into the common good, whoever the Satoshis were, donated it to the world, didn't want to be known, which I think is brilliant, and set up a system that is self-policing, because all the node runners, collectively, I mean, unless 51% of them decide, and it would not be in their self-interest to do so, it can't be changed. And so, you've now got, I mean, all humans are naturally flawed, as we know, and but you've now got a system that's not controlled by humans. It's controlled by computers and math. And I don't think people fully absorb just how big a change that is. I mean, as an example, when the internet came around, and people were sending emails, that's nice. Okay, so we had Novell before that, but now somebody described the internet to me as well. You've got Novell. I don't know if you probably ever heard the name Novell, but before the internet came around, there was a company called Novell in the United States, which allowed you to hook up all your computers in an office and send each other emails, right? So I could send an email to the guy in the office next door. Now, not that was that important. I could walk right next door to him and talk to him. It was kind of a neat little trick, and Novell built a pretty good business selling the cards and the cables and the software that allowed you to do that. When the internet came out, somebody described it to me and said, well, imagine if you could do Novell to anybody in the world. And I was like, what do you mean? You mean like somebody on the other side of the country, I could send them an email? Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. That's a big thing. But at the time, could I see Amazon? Could I see eBay? Could I see, all the various things that were going to happen? Could I see Zoom? I mean, no, I had no idea any of that stuff was coming. But I did know that connecting people, over long distances very cheaply. And in fact, so the initial use case was really just replacing U.S. mail, or sending a file. I mean, and it cut into FedEx's business, right? Because I mean, we used to have to, it cut into all kinds of businesses where information became free, or much easier to access. And that's the same thing. That's the same kind of invention we've got here with Bitcoin. And everybody is going to need to play in this system. And the base layer is a layer that'll be important, and it's of limited size, and therefore you can participate in the growth of the network by owning a piece. I mean, imagine if you could own a piece of TCP/IP. I mean, you can't, but that's what the base layer of Bitcoin is like. And so it's going to be enormously valuable. And, yes, the transactions every 10 minutes, and the blocks are slow and so on and so forth. And that's because it's so secure. But what will happen, as we all know, is they will build layers on top of that give you all the other functionality. And that's the Lightning Network today. And I just came back from a trip where we were orange pilling almost everyone we saw by having them download a Muun wallet and giving them $1.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have a Muun wallet yet.
I do. Yeah.
That's one of the to me, that's one of the most powerful ways. Everyone says, well, yeah, I've heard about Bitcoin. It's too expensive and too slow. I'm like, really? You think so? Show me your cell phone. Yeah. Download this app. Okay. Put in your 4-digit. Fine. Okay. See this. Punch here. Okay. Punch Lightning. Okay. Punch receipt.
Bang.
Yeah. Take a picture of the QR. Here, I'm going to send you $1. Push send. 3 seconds later, it's in their account. And they're like, oh, shit.
Yeah. There's no middleman.
That's powerful, right? I mean, I got this from Alex Gladstein's book, Check Your Financial Privilege, which I highly recommend.
It's brilliant. I've just started reading.
Have you read
I've read some of the articles already, but it's fantastic.
Oh, it's a fabulous book. It's a fabulous book. And so, we've got to use this stuff. And, so who should be scared? Western Union, they should be terrified.
Correct.
Jack Mallers and Strike are going to come in and they're going to disrupt the card. All the MasterCard, Visa, they should be terrified.
Yeah.
300 basis points for something that Lightning can do for less than a penny. I don't think so, guys. That's just not going to fly. Yeah. So, and by the way, all of these things, they're without a bank. There's no bank involved. Yeah. It's just you to me, right, and me to you. And yes, the on-chain analytics for for the coins themselves, they're pretty good. And people say, well, your transactions really aren't that private, and they're right to a degree. But boy, on-chain analytics for Lightning, good luck, because the thing's hopping all over the place. Nobody's gonna be able to know who paid who what.
No, Lightning, you physically can't do it. No, definitely.
You can't do it. You can't do it. So the privacy piece comes back, which I think is a big part of. One of the things I think is beautiful about cash, and one of the things I hate about all the government oversight they're going for is they're going for these CBDCs. Is they want to get into our lives and control our lives, right?
Yeah.
And Bitcoin fights back against that, which I love.
And that's a great kind of segue into another question I was going to get to. So, first I just want to highlight like the fact that you saw the birth of the internet and you experienced the shift in human behavior that enabled a bunch of businesses to start that didn't previously exist and cannibalize some other company. It's awesome, right? And Bitcoin to you feels very similar. So
it's the exact same thing, guys.
I like leveraging, I'm an investor as well. I like to leverage other people's experience. And by you explaining that to me, it gives me extra confidence in Bitcoin really is as interesting as I think.
This is the same movie. It's like been there, done that. It's totally the same movie.
Bring it on.
Right now in internet terms, we're probably about 2007. I had the first internet IPO, a company called Netcom, which was an internet service provider in the United States in 1995. And the Netscape browser came out in 1995, and Windows was just getting to be usable at that time. Before that, in the early days of the internet, it was actually green screen. And we're all still dial-up modems. This was long before broadband came. We're talking 9,600 baud, well, less, 2,400 baud in the beginning.
And sorry, Larry, where do you think, in terms of the internet's progress, date-wise, where do you peg Bitcoin today, roughly?
Yeah, so like I say, I think Bitcoin is at the 19. I misspoke earlier. I think I said 2000, but I think
you
Bitcoin
said 2007.
Right now,
that sounds too late.
Yeah, I'm wrong. I wasn't thinking. No, the 1997. It's about
1997. Okay, great. Yeah, so pre-Google, pre-Facebook,
Oh yeah, all those were all of that stuff. Yeah, they were founded after that. And
interesting.
It takes time. There's no, and everyone in the Bitcoin space wants everything to happen instantly, but that's not the way it works. But it's moving along. It's really moving along. As an example, Lightning was a twinkle in somebody's eye a few years ago, and I'm moving money around on Muun wallets. I can orange pill anyone anywhere in the world. They can show me their QR code, and I can send them $1 in 3 seconds for less than a penny.
Yeah. And actually, that's a couple stories I heard about. So the brothers that set up Stripe, the Collison brothers, they were really famous. So I went through some tech accelerators one was called Entrepreneur First, and they're early stage talent investment programs. It's similar to like a Y Combinator, but in the UK it started. And they spoke about the Collison brothers being like excellent founders because they would basically take their MVP and they would get people to use it within the YC ecosystem to do online payments and basically help put the payments mechanisms into websites for taking credit card details and all this stuff.
Yeah.
The point being is they were like very active founders that had a product that they knew was going to work for basically everyone, and they would physically show people. And we were encouraged, we were taught this lesson, be like the Collison brothers, teach people about your digital products. Well, what you've just described as to like, someone's go, oh, I don't know about Bitcoin. Get your app store up, download the Muun wallet. I'm sending you $1, and you've done it within 5 minutes. And they're like, holy shit. And so that doesn't involve NatWest or Bank of America or, Westpac. No, it doesn't. I've just sent you money digitally. And it's like, that is the kind of thing that people go, oh, right. Okay. Because like everything, it's a lesson, isn't it? We need to be taught things, and you explore, and it's about experience. And so you fail, and then you try again, and then it works. And it's kind of this slow process of engagement, isn't it? And yeah, I think that's a brilliant way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to spread. It's just going to spread. And that's why everybody who's on the other side of this is they're just not seeing the bigger picture. And
in terms of adoption, Larry, I'd love to chime in. I've spoken recently to 2 guests. I haven't released their episodes yet, but based in Africa. One, she was a activist for Togo, grew up in Togo, and all the problems they've had with, French monetary oversight for how many generations. Then also a guy in Kenya, in Nairobi. And, it's just extraordinary listening to them about Bitcoin adoption in Africa. Like the financial system there is so broken that you don't have to sell Bitcoin to them. Not like we do in the States or Australia or the UK. They're like, oh, so this is a system that's not involving the corrupt fucks that run this place. Yes. Okay, I'll use it. I mean, it's as simple as that. They get it straight away.
Yeah.
And it's just you're looking for hockey stick growth. Bang, it's there.
Oh,
it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, those are the people who are being the most badly hurt by the corrupt system. I mean, look at
the Kenyan shilling is pegged to the States.
And look at, I mean, all these, these countries, I mean, like El Salvador and the remittances that have been going through there. I mean, all these money changers are taking huge chunks of people's money. And when they discover, my relative who's working in the States can make some money and send it to me, and it cost me 7 sats to receive, for them to send it. And I now have that money in a wallet on my cell phone without paying the fee to get it down there. I mean, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And it's only going to spread. So then they tell their friends, and they tell their friends. And, I mean, think of the first time you saw the internet. I mean, think of the first time you were introduced to the internet and you said, well, what is this? What does it do?
What is it? Let me have a go.
What is it? How does it work? And, before you know it, it was like, oh my God, I can do that. I can see that. Oh, and I mean, use cases just start popping up all over the place. Right.
Yeah. It's so exciting.
It's good stuff. It's very exciting to me to be involved in something.
I can hear your passion coming through. It's
gonna make the world a better place. It really is. And that's why, I mean, I'll talk with anybody who's got concerns or is negative or wants to be a doubting Tom. And I got no problem. People ought to be concerned. There've been a lot of ways that people have been frauded in the past. And so I'll help anybody try to sort it out. The only thing I won't stand for is people who just absolutely tell lies about it or badmouth it without any basis in fact, because I think it's got a great chance of vastly improving the world, and therefore anybody who's really trying to run it down, that makes me mad. They
have to have ulterior motives. Like it's as simple as that.
Maybe I don't know. I mean, I look at
it's a bad idea. Just either hasn't done the work or gains from the existing system remaining in place.
That's true. I mean, that's your Charlie Munger, but you've also got guys like Peter Schiff who are just arrogant, and you got gold guys who shit on it, and they should know better. Yeah,
that's true. And so speaking of gold, this is where I was going to go, and we got sidetracked. There's too many things to talk about, Larry. But shout out to my friend Gaz Larking for his question. But you have a view on the gold price and how it was suppressed. I'd love to learn about how you came across this, and I'm assuming it's connected to the 2008-2009
It
situation,
is. I mean,
and how might that be replicated in a Bitcoin world, and what should we be
that's a,
concerned about?
I get this question a lot. And it's a really great question. So, we could spend hours on this topic. So I'll try to give you the abbreviated version. Anybody who's been in the gold investing business for a long period of time and done their homework knows that there was a very conscious, many times in history, and more specifically, directly recently, there's been a conscious effort to suppress the price of gold. And the reason for that is that gold represents an existential threat to the fiat system, right? If everybody didn't trust the fiat system and they trusted gold, the fiat guys wouldn't be able to issue the paper they'd issue, and so on and so forth. So with that as a backdrop, there's an organization called GATA, GATA.org is their website, which has probably got the most authoritative data on the gold manipulation. They've been following this stuff for 10 or 15 years now. Chris Powell and Bill Murphy are the guys who run it. They're friends and they're great guys. Just little touch points. There was a London gold pool in the 60s where they tried to hold the price of gold at $35 and manipulate it. It's well known. You can Google it. It failed, but they used paper. And the principal means by which they manipulate gold, and this is because governments, the BIS, et cetera, have bigger balance sheets than everyone else, is they can sell paper gold into the market. I mean, there's a price at which you and I could exchange a gold coin for, and we could say, that's the price of gold. I've got a coin, you want a coin, what are you going to pay? That's the gold price. Fine. But in fact, when you have futures markets and derivatives markets, what you're able to do is somebody can come to the table and say, I'm going to sell you an ounce of gold. Now, they may not have that ounce of gold to sell. Doesn't matter. They're on the hook for it. And if it goes against them, they're going to pay you the difference between what you sold it for and what they bought it for. But the point is that they're creating paper gold. They're creating a claim on gold that they may not have. The current estimates today are that there are probably between 10 and 1,000 paper claims on every real ounce of gold in existence. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it's hard to, it boggles the mind, but it's hard to do. But what it shows you is that every time the price of gold has gone up through kind of black pools and, shady operations, the governments are able to sell paper gold for gold that they don't have into the marketplace to try and shove the price of gold down. And if they end up taking a loss, remember, they control the printing press and they can print more money.
Yeah.
So in a sense, they have a big unlimited balance sheet and they can use it to manipulate the price of gold. And that's the fundamental problem with capitalism and what we think is free market capitalism, but really isn't. Because in a game where you allow derivatives, in my opinion, should be banned. They should be outlawed completely.
Interesting.
Except perhaps with, maybe forward sales of farmers, people who are actually willing to take delivery of the wheat or the oil, and people who are producing the wheat and the oil should be able to, basically sell contracts amongst themselves, backed by a real physical thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, that
but
makes
beyond
sense,
that,
doesn't it?
right.
I'm a large baking business, and I need to secure corn a
I
year
want
in
to buy wheat in
advance.
advance. Fine.
I want
And you're a
50%
large
up
farmer and
front.
you're going to grow wheat. Let's
A
strike a
grape
price.
grower, a wine and business. Like, that makes sense to me. I agree.
But the minute you open it up to unlimited futures writing and options and derivatives contracts, what you get into is that if somebody is really big and has a ton of money, they can come in and just sell a bunch of something that they don't have and drive the price down.
Yeah, on
screwing
anything.
the people.
Yeah.
Anything. Screwing the people who are providing it, right? I mean, basically stealing from those people. Now, they have to cover that short at some future date, and they're at risk as a result of being short. But, they can find ways to cover it. And if they're a government and they don't have a P&L and they've hidden it off balance sheet, that's not really that big a risk. And so, there are a number of papers. Barsky and Summers wrote one. Robert Rubin, who was an ex-gold trader at Aaron and Company before he ran Goldman Sachs. He was Clinton's Treasury Secretary. He did a bunch of work that showed that, basically they manipulated the gold market to hold the dollar and paper money as strong as it is. And let me just give you an order of magnitude so you kind of understand just how manipulated this is. In 1971, in theory, you could take, one of the U.S. monetary aggregates, let's pick M1 as an example, and you could look at the 6,300 tons of gold, 8,300 tons of gold that the United States owns. And you could divide the money supply by the ounces of gold, and you'd come up with a $35 reference price, which is why it was pegged there after Bretton Woods. Okay, I mean, roughly. I'm being a little loose with the numbers, but
Yeah.
the point is there was a certain
The
amount
point
of
is
gold.
a US dollar still represented a piece of gold in theory.
Exactly, at least on an international standard. And the French came over and grabbed a bunch of it. But the point is, there was a link that had been established at Bretton Woods. So the amount of gold we had divided by the amount of dollars outstanding, $35 roughly. Today, you do the exact same math today. The dollars outstanding, the amount of gold we have, an ounce of gold should be selling for $84,000.
Holy fuck! Wow.
Yeah, holy fuck, right? I mean, that just goes to show you how much paper we've created in excess of the gold that we hold. So that the notion that our money is money good is just, compared to the old money of gold.
So, I mean, what's
is
that?
just absurd.
200x essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 200x. It's absurd. That's what suppressing gold has allowed them to do. So let's move on to the question I'm sure a lot of you people are asking. Well, why can't they just do that with Bitcoin? The answer is they can. There is a futures market, but
They can. Did you say? Oh, they can't.
They can. No, they can, because there is a futures market for Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Go on Glassnode, and they keep a lot of great Bitcoin statistics. Go on Glassnode, and you can see that there are today roughly $20 billion of Bitcoin futures derivatives contracts out there.
Mm.
The good news is, so in terms of the amount of gold that trades and the amount of gold that's in futures contracts, I don't have the exact numbers right off the top of my head, but the fact is that it's like 100x. The futures contracts are 100x the amount of physical trading, which again represents all that paper gold. If I went to Coinbase earlier today, or Coin Market Cap earlier today, and I noticed we're trading about $20 billion worth of Bitcoin a day. Okay. And there are about $20 billion worth of Bitcoin derivatives outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of derivatives relative to the trading, and remember I told you a moment ago, gold derivatives, gold trading, the multiple's 100.
Yeah.
Okay. If we're trading 20 billion a day times 365, that's a certain number. It's bigger than 20, obviously. We're trading, and we've got 20 billion. Derivatives today compared to the total size of the Bitcoin market and Bitcoin that's trading, they're relatively modest. The Bitcoin market cap is what, $400 billion roughly today? I don't know. I'll have to check it. But it's down a lot from where it was, obviously. But the point is, 389 Bitcoin market cap right now is $389 billion.
Yeah, unbelievable.
We've got $20 billion of Bitcoin derivatives. Okay.
Yeah.
$20 billion isn't going to shove around that three. It's not big enough yet, but it's growing. And I can tell you from my guess, knowing how evil the other side is and how they will change the rules whenever they can to screw sound money people. My guess is the other side has got a project going on in this department. They're working out. When Bitcoin went from 5 to 50,000, I'm sure alarm bells went off in a lot of capitals around the world. Holy shit, this is a real threat. And so I'm sure that they are trying to build up ways to get more and more involved in this. And that's why I think it's kind of a race against time. We've got to kill fiat before they get this thing totally under control.
Into it. But so Larry, so what this isn't a fully thought out rationale against why derivatives and Bitcoin aren't going to be the same as gold, but just to talk through some of the attributes of Bitcoin. I can own it on a small hard drive in my house or in my head, and I can send it to anyone, anywhere, anytime. A piece of gold cannot be divided up into infinite amount of pieces. A piece of gold, generally speaking, you cannot send to the other side of the world. So it's not as divisible or as portable. Those two characteristics in particular, to me, mean that a derivatives market is not as necessary in the first place. So individuals can trade Bitcoin with each other in a way that you can't trade gold. And so therefore, why do you need the kind of paper angle to gold with Bitcoin? And therefore, will it be as, I don't know, I can see the initial demand for paper gold as just an easier way of transacting, but Bitcoin doesn't require that. And so therefore, is there such a kind of simple way of massaging people into using derivatives that then can be coerced into, suppressing price in the way that gold has been?
Agreed. You're right. It's a good line of thought, and you're correct. But those gold derivatives weren't. It wasn't really the hedgers and the gold bugs that were using those derivatives, in my opinion.
Okay.
It was the governments that were using them, and
so literally weaponized derivatives, essentially.
Yeah, and if they decide, hey, this thing's a threat, they could make an effort
Well,
to
they can
come
print
after
whatever
it.
they
Now,
want to do whatever they
yeah,
want. Right? Yeah.
remember, they've got the printing press and they can do it behind the scenes. The one other difference too, though, that I think would mess them up and wreck them is, and because I know a lot of the, JP Morgan is the biggest player in the gold derivatives market, and they make a lot of money off it, in my estimation. And they can do it in part because gold doesn't do five baggers, right? I mean, it's much bigger, it's much more fully distributed, and it doesn't go up 500% in 4 months the way Bitcoin did in the fall of 2020. And if it did, and you're on the wrong side of it, you get wrecked, right? So Bitcoin's got in some ways, people complain about this volatility, and yet, one of the it makes, it's like a porcupine. It kind of, in a way, it kind of defends Bitcoin a little bit.
Yeah.
It's so volatile. It's like, yeah, okay, okay, JP Morgan, go ahead and short it. We're going to carry you out, right?
Yeah.
Unless you really do have a government backstop. Right?
That's an interesting point. I've not had anyone say that before, because most people talk of volatility as an issue for adoption in the short term. But what
Yes.
you've just explained is that actually it's a really, really good defense mechanism for nefarious actors
Yes.
trying to suppress price. And actually, even
Right.
going back to these conversations I had with my friends in Africa recently, they don't care about volatility because the
Right.
system is already better than their broken financial system. So they're adopting it anyway. So,
Right.
see ya, basically.
Right. See ya.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
See ya. Yeah. Yeah.
Larry,
I
what
mean,
I'd love to ask, sorry, just to make sure we get
that's
this in before we finish the call. We only had an hour. I mean, we could go for hours and hours and
yeah,
hours. I've got hundreds of questions
whatever
for
you
you.
like. Yeah.
But you mentioned CrossFit and having a
Yeah.
bit of a moment in your life where you realized, oh God, I've got to really do something about, maybe it was your physical or mental health. I'm not sure. I'd
It
love
was
to learn a
both,
bit more
actually.
about that. So what was going on at the time? How are you
Yeah.
feeling? And I'm
Well,
really just
it's,
intrigued in,
look,
like, people overcome challenges, and it's just fascinating why and how.
yeah. So, well, look, I mean, when a problem arises, the teacher emerges, right? I mean,
Yep.
I just had the shit kicked out of me from 2011 to 2015. I'd watched my net worth really take a big hit, and it was, the numbers were all very meaningful. And I thought, I couldn't figure it out. Why am I wrong? And what am I going to do about it? And then I kind of came to the conclusion, you're not wrong, but markets breathe, and this one's breathed against you. And so, you got to make sure you're around until you're right again, because you're going to be right. But, gold went from 1900 down to 1,000. Now it's back up to 1800 again. But, that time frame, that it was 1,000 in 2015. So what is that now? 7 years ago. So in 2015, I think I started CrossFit in 2014. And I'd been a desk jockey my whole life. I was athletic when I was younger, high school and so forth. And I was always kind of a runner. And I wasn't a slug, but I wasn't really into, extreme physical fitness and maybe not into extreme mental fitness. I'd had a pretty successful career and had done pretty well. And this was probably the biggest setback I'd ever had. And I was kind of very much on my own, because I was a one-man band running a business and I didn't even have a partner at the time. So, and yeah, I mean, it can shake you up mentally and physically. And so I started reading books about excellence. And I started reading books about, competition. And somehow I got introduced to a guy that I went to the school I went to, a guy named Mark Devine, who wrote a book called Unbeatable Mind. He was a Navy SEAL. And he talked about mental toughness and how to achieve mental tough. And I figured, I'm getting the shit kicked out of me. I need to get more mentally tough. And you talk about, if you want to achieve mental, it's, the body, human souls we're a bunch of things. You're a bunch of molecules, but we're a spirit, but we're also our physical body. And it's all tied together, right? And if you truly want to be mentally tough, you got to be physically tough. And I don't know how much you know about the Navy SEAL culture, Navy SEALs in the United States, but these are about the biggest badasses in the world. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like the SAS probably over in Britain, or the French Foreign Legion. I mean, the training these guys go through to get mentally tough is just, it's off the charts. I mean, very few people are able to make it. I actually went out and did one of his programs. It was really excellent. And he talked about how he said, look, if you really want to get, you want to go to this mental tough space, you got to get physically fit. And if you want to get physically fit, there's this system that does it better than anything I'm aware of. and it's called CrossFit. And it's founded by a guy named Greg Glassman, and he actually grew it out of the SEAL culture. And the real big invention was that if you really want to move the needle in terms of your fitness, you need to trigger a bunch of hormones that don't normally get triggered, and that just going out and jogging for an hour or just lifting a few weights, that doesn't really do it. Your body responds to what you put into it. And we were naturally, way back when, we'd get into fight or flight mode. And if you want to get the growth hormone and the testosterone, all the things that make you really tough as nails, you got to go 100%. And I mean, I'm talking like, how many burpees can you, how fast can you do 100 burpees is a classic, CrossFit test. And you know what a burpee is, right? Most people know
Yeah,
what a burpee
absolutely.
is.
I hate them.
Doing 100 of them in a row, for time, that will leave you pretty well tuckered out.
Yeah, bro.
And I think my best time, I think I got it down to like 7 minutes. If I did it today, it'd probably be 10 minutes. But going super hard at something, until you almost break and then stopping will trigger hormones and growth in your systems that you can't get any other way. And that's really that's the magic. It's called high intensity interval training. That's really the magic of CrossFit. That if you want to get fitter than you've ever been, you want to lose weight, you want to be strong, you want to be, and then, by the way, you get all kinds of endorphins and you feel great. I mean, it is kind of like you're beating your head against the wall and you stop, you feel great. But, if you push yourself really hard, you see development that you just can't see in any other way. And the great thing about the CrossFit gyms and the training and the systems is everybody knows how hard it is. Excuse me. So it's an incredibly supportive environment. And you can come in, doesn't matter. You can start as, you can be obese, you can be out of shape. It doesn't matter where you start. They will walk you through it and bring you from where you are to where you want to be. And what it really does, to me, it's like an anti-aging formula. I mean, I've had all my numbers done, all my tests done, etc. I'm 65. I feel fitter than I was 45. And so, there's another book that I read that really triggered this whole thing. I recommend to your older listeners. It's a book called Younger Next Year. I can't remember the author, but I know I've got the title correct, called Younger Next Year. The guy's named Harry something or other. And this is a guy in New York who was a big, high-powered lawyer. And he went to his doctor in his 50s. His doctor said, dude, if you don't change, you're going to die. You're going to have a heart attack and die. And he went out and researched everything he had to do. And he didn't find CrossFit. It didn't exist at the time, but he found high-intensity interval training. And he put him in, he completely remade himself. Because, my view is when you're young, it hasn't happened to you, but you'll see when you get to be in your 50s, stuff starts breaking. You're just kind of like, oh, this is a drag. You know what I mean? I'm starting, and you can either decide you're going to fight against it because you want to be fit and healthy and strong until you're 95, or you can just say, well, I'll just kind of let it keep breaking and I'll slowly deteriorate. And by the time I'm 75, I won't be able to move very well and I won't be very strong and I won't, and so, what Younger Next Year talked about is this guy's commitment to change the pattern. And, he's in his 90s now and he's fit as a fiddle and doing great. And I would submit, that the US and the world's healthcare problems could be taken care of by, if everyone did CrossFit or everyone did some variation on this, we would have a much healthier planet and people would feel better overall. I mean, their lives would be improved in many aspects. What's the cost? The cost is basically every day you got to commit a little under an hour with, warm up and cool down. The workout itself might only be 15 or 20 minutes long, and it's everything. I mean, it's running, it's weightlifting, it's rowing, it's jumping rope, it's throwing wall balls against a wall. It's, there are a million movements. I mean, the other thing they recognize is that, if you do something exercise wise, if you do the same thing over and over again, it gets incredibly boring. And so every workout's different. And every workout generally has like 4 or 5 different movements. So it's like, okay, we're going to start off, we're going to do 10 push-ups, then we're going to do 10 box jumps, then we're going to do 15 deadlifts, and then you're going to run 200 meters. And that's one round. And we're going to do 5 rounds of that for time. Do it as fast as you can. And everyone's going to write their time up on the board. And that you're going to feel competitive with everyone else because you want to have as good a time as you possibly can. And more importantly, then we're going to repeat that so that you're going to do it this year. And then a year later, we're going to do it again. And, oh, gee, you're a year older, but your time was better. How's that working? You're older, but you're fitter. Right. And so I got to tell you, it's a brilliant system. I just can't say enough about it. And anybody who takes the dive into it, if you commit yourself to it, it will deliver for you. The only, my mantra, and the mantra that they gave me when I showed up when I was 30 pounds heavier and pretty out of shape, I said, is this going to work for me? I'm not young. And they said, oh yeah, it's going to work fine. I said, well, what do I got to do? They just said, you got to keep walking through the door.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, okay. And they said, there are going to be days you don't feel like it, but you got to keep walking through the door, and you got to do the best you can. But if you walk through that door 5 days a week, take a few days off, work 5 days a week, it'll change your life. And they were absolutely right. It completely changed my life. So highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, Larry, listen, an hour's gone by. I could do 10 more, I'm sure. No problem. Thank you so much
Happy to
for sharing all that
reschedule
with
another
me.
one. Yeah, give us a little time. We'll do it again.
Yeah, we'll do it in a year or so. I will be, my conviction for Bitcoin has got deeper, and I'm now thinking get online and have a look at the local CrossFit. So yeah, I can
you
feel the
should.
passion coming through.
I hope you do. I'm telling you, if you do it and you have questions, you want help, reach out to
Yeah,
me.
no, I will.
I've been there. I know how.
I've been doing some good training lately, but sometimes it's
Good.
good to change it up. And you mentioned the word community. It really strikes me as interesting that, we like being parts of communities, and especially supportive ones. And Bitcoin is very like this whole toxic thing. Interesting, but whatever, in a sense. Like, I've never ever found it so easy to, like this conversation, reach out to people and get a bit of their time, which is their most valuable resource. And people want to teach you, and you want to learn, and it's a very, very inclusive space. I've been to some meetups here in Australia, and you meet Bitcoiners in real life, and they're, it's a really important part of it. So it's interesting that you're into CrossFit, which is in a way a proof of work test. Can you force yourself to go and do this physical exercise regularly and gain the benefits from it, which is physical improvement, physical performance, and a community that goes with it? And Bitcoin's very similar. Work out what Bitcoin is. That requires work. With that comes a community. It's very similar.
Exactly right. I'm telling you, they are both. People say, how do you keep your spirits up in this bear market for Bitcoin and bear market for gold, whatever? I'm like, because I know that we're right, and I know that we're changing the world. I mean, Bitcoin is hope. I travel all over the world. I meet Bitcoiners. I have yet to meet somebody who's a Bitcoiner that I don't like. I mean, slightly different flavors here and there, but if somebody's into Bitcoin, they get it. And I think you'll find the same thing. I've walked into CrossFit gyms all over the world, and it's the exact same thing. Because what it is it's all about, hope and the potential of the human spirit. And Bitcoin's about the potential of the human spirit in terms of doing honest business and adding value and not stealing. And CrossFit is about the human potential of, being the best version of ourselves physically and mentally that you can be. And the communities, they do overlap a lot. Most of my CrossFit friends are Bitcoiners. Not all my Bitcoin friends are CrossFitters, but I'm working on that.
Well, you'll get
so
there.
Maybe I'll get you.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, walk into a CrossFit gym and just tell them the story the way I told it to you.
Yeah.
And say, I want to give this a try. And I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised.
So I've been on an interesting weight training program recently, and that's going really well. And I've been playing around with my diet, but it's the intensity thing I'm interested in, because I think it's very easy to cruise through a kind of 40-minute weight training session where you're doing a few sets at a certain rep. And yes, your weight is increasing week on week. I'm still increasing, which is great.
Excellent.
But it's about that like peak intensity moment that really changes things in your body in terms of like physical excellence, as far as I understand. And I'm concerned that my current program doesn't do that often enough, and therefore you're probably not making the progress you could be making.
And it's funny you should mention that. As I've aged and I've been doing CrossFit for quite some time now, CrossFit didn't have, and as you get older, your cardio is not the issue. Maintaining muscle mass is. And so I actually, my program right now is about 3 days a week of CrossFit and about 3 days a week of weightlifting.
Okay.
So I go back and forth, and I do the CrossFit for the cardio and the intensity and the hormones.
Yeah.
But I do the weightlifting because if I just if I just do CrossFit, I get too skinny.
Okay.
You know, your body, because you know, cardio and muscle building are in conflict. I mean, you know, I mean, if you're going to try and build as much muscle as possible, I mean, they're really well-known super heavy weightlifters that literally, you know, they won't walk up the stairs because they don't want the cardio to distract from their trying to build muscle, right?
Yeah, they need a
And
bungalow.
as you know, marathoners can't clean and jerk 50 pounds
Yeah.
because they're skinny as rails. And so,
Wow.
you know, there's a balance in there. And I think, you know, CrossFit, total fitness is a balance of the two. But yeah, give it a try. I think you'll really enjoy
No,
it.
I
But
will.
I've really enjoyed being on your show.
No,
And,
thanks,
you know,
Larry.
anytime you want to talk, just give me a shout. We'll set up another hour.
Will do. And so my last question, if people want to reach out and get in touch, what's the best way?
Yeah. So, well, there are two things. You know, I shit post a lot on Twitter. I'm kind of a loudmouth, but you know, I view this as my role, is to try and advocate for sound money. So I'm at Lawrence Lepard on Twitter, just my name. And then I also have a website. I write a quarterly letter. It's free. Talks about sound money, talks about my fund. And that website is EMA, the number 2.com. So Edward Mark Alpha 2.com. And my partner and I, you know, publish these letters, and there's a lot of data on there about sound money, a lot of papers. There's a white paper about Bitcoin on there, all kinds of, it's all free.
Wonderful.
So, you know, we're not selling anything. So,
Well, Larry, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate
thank
it. It's
you.
great to get to know you.
Yeah, enjoyed it, Jake. Good luck.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Let me know how you do on CrossFit. I'd love to hear
I
it.
will
Okay.
do. No, of course. No
Okay.
problem.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.